Hey guys, today I'm out in southern Washington with Nick and of course the new Honda Prologue. Now we of course have done a number of Prologue videos on the channel as well, so in this video let's just talk about how Nick feels about the Prologue, and then we'll talk about why I really wanted a Prologue before we got the Chevy Blazer. Walk us through the styling on this, and what do you think about that choice between Blazer and Prologue? Which is prettier?
I've actually never seen the Blazer EV in person. I have seen this in person now. This is my first look at it, and I do love the styling. I love how almost square it is, but it's rounded off on all the sharp edges. You have very smooth headlights, smooth front grille. Everything kind of flows nicely, and obviously the concept of an EV is to try to make it as efficient as possible. Now, they wanted to try to keep this boxy nature of it while keeping it round and aerodynamically efficient, and I think they've done that very well. Now, I love how the headlights kind of blend in with the rest of the body lines. You have functional air vents going from the front grille around the wheels. You have a radar out front, and you have a 360 camera, parking sensors, everything here in this elite trim, because this is going to be the top trim, so you're going to have all of the doodads equipped on this vehicle. Now, what do you think about this? Because you have the Blazer.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Now, and it's funny because I think it's almost exactly the same color. Ours is a little bit more electric blue, and this is kind of a darker blue. But I like the shape of this better than the Chevy Blazer. The Blazer has that sort of, just general GM SUV thing going on where they're trying to disguise some of the boxiness of the profile. And Honda, I think, just doubled down on the boxiness of the Prologue, and I kind of like that better, especially the back. What do you think of the taillights back here? This, for me, I think is the best angle for the Prologue. Yeah, it's that back end design.
Let me step back a little bit and take a look. It's interesting seeing that Honda logo going across that bar on the lift gate, because it's just different from what I've ever seen on a Honda. I really like, just like with the headlights up front, I love how the taillights blend into the rest of the body lines. It kind of just makes it look very uniform and put together on the exterior side of things.
I really like the light design on this better, I think, than the Chevy. Just the cool sort of 3D nature of these elements in the rear. Now, is this LED or is this incandescent kind of buried in there? That is a full LED, and I actually really think that that's kind of a cool theme. They put a diffuser around there, and then they have this sort of line around there, and then some 3D elements inside. If we go up front, you can see what the front looks like. Of course, we also have the repeaters there on the side view mirror, and then up front, we have a very distinctive Honda touch to a lot of the same components that we find in the Blazer and the Equinox. And of course, the reason we're talking about the Blazer and the Equinox is because they're all related. They all run on the same GM Ultimum platform. Same battery, same electric motors, which, is a pro and a con. So the pro is that parts are going to be really easy to find because GM's making a lot of Ultimum vehicles. The downside is that this is pretty darn heavy. I mean, we're talking, V8 Dodge Durango kind of curb weights for this, and of course the Acura ZDX, which is closely related and interestingly right over there with Sofian from Redline, so we'll be taking a look at that in another video. I also really like these wheels. Are you a fan of Honda wheels lately?
I'm a huge fan. I was actually going to mention that walking around the side. I love these wheels on this vehicle. I think a 19 would look a little too small for the boxy nature of it, and I think that these 21s or 22s. Am I losing my mind here?
Let's see what these are. These are the 21s, yeah.
275, 45, 21s. And I actually love this design. It's so different. And
it is.
Kind of having that machine face balanced with that black, almost making this spoke look floating.
And this is not an overly aerodynamic wheel. So you can see, lots of open spaces there through the brakes, etc. So it's not that all blacked off aero wheel that you find in so many new EVs today.
I enjoy that. I'm not a huge fan of those aero discs or the aero covers they put on wheels for EVs. So this is a huge win in my book, at least the 21s. The 19s I've yet to see. Maybe those are as well good, but I don't have those next to us to compare.
Now, one big advantage for this over a lot of the EV competition like the Ioniq 5 or the EV6 is the interior size. So why don't you hop in? Let's see how that actually lines up. Because this is a mid-size EV. This is based on the Blazer platform, not the Equinox EV, and that means we get a lot of extra room inside. Yeah. How far back is that seat? Sit however you might want to sit.
I have long legs, and that's not even to the front.
Yeah, there's a lot of room there. And then let's see how much room there is behind you. I'll just hop in the back here. And as you can see, my knees are really almost touching that seat, but that's how much room there is. Nick was driving, and and there's that much
That is
room behind.
shocking.
So this is the kind of vehicle where you could really easily put rear-facing child seats in the back behind pretty tall drivers up front. So if you're looking at an EV and you're thinking to yourself, you know, the Model 3 is a little bit too small, Model Y even a bit too small, you certainly want to check out something like this because there's massive amounts of legroom in the back.
That is a lot. And it seems like there's a little bit of a deep bolster here in the middle. Now, is that adult rated or is that going to be mostly
Yeah,
a child?
this is interesting because not only, and I'll hand the camera to you so everybody can kind of see this, but not only is this you know, roomy in terms of legroom, it has a really wide bench because this is a really wide EV as well. And that means an adult can actually sit here in the middle and, you know, my butt kind of feels like it's in, you know, it's kind of like a sportier seat where I can really feel the edges of those bolsters. But this has 3 very distinct seating positions in it. Lots of headroom still, and even in this position, you know, my hair is pretty close to the ceiling. The outboard seats are a little bit lower, but there's just gobs and gobs of room in here. If you want to check out our child seat fitment video, we have one on the channel on the Blazer. The dimensions are essentially the same, and you can put a 6'4" person up front, some of those really big convertible child seats behind. Tons of room. Big armrest there, of course, cup holders, and then we have the 60/40 fold down rear seats with a cargo area in the back that is not as big as you might think. Now, Honda says that in some ways this is sort of an electrified Passport, but the cargo area, that is definitely smaller than the Passport's cargo area.
Yeah, it's definitely a trade-off having that large back seat to have all of that legroom. That seat's gonna be pretty far pushed back in terms of where it sits in the dimensions of the vehicle. It's gonna sacrifice a little bit of cargo room, but as you can see, we have 2 roller bags upright, still room for 2 more upright over to the left side. And do we have any more storage under here?
There is a little bit of storage under there. I will say, well, you're taking that out of the cargo area, that in a Passport, you'd be able to line up 24-inch roller bags really easily in the back. So definitely a taller and squarer cargo area in that gasoline Honda. And there's a little bit of additional storage under there, and it does shrink a little bit apparently if you choose the all-wheel drive model instead of the front-wheel drive model.
You know, I will say that is nice down here having this extra storage compartment, because if you did have grocery bags or whatever it may be, you could probably fit those in there and they're not going to roll around, they're not going to get too crazy, and they'll be out of sight, out of mind, and get those out of the view of anybody.
Or if you want to store like the charge cord, that's what's in this bag. The charge cord, you can just drop that in there.
Or a jacket,
that's pretty easy. You know,
whatever you want to stuff in there, there's plenty of room to do that.
Now, one thing to know is that even though we have the relatively long hood profile here, and I'll just go ahead and pop the hood. This is one of those double pull hood releases. Under the hood, we don't find any additional storage space, and that's because they were just really dedicated to the crash structure and the design of this. They also logically wanted to save a bit of money, but as you can see, there is quite a lot of room under here. They really could have rearranged things here and given us actually a pretty decent storage area, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it would be narrow, but it would be something. But it'd be more plastic.
Yeah, and they could have always, they could have moved some of these modules. They could have tossed the battery in that cargo well in the back or moved it off to the side or something like that. I'm a little bit sad in vehicles like this where we have this pretty long hood profile and no additional storage space under the hood. But if this had been shaped like a Kia EV6, I'm okay with the lack of a front trunk, because that Kia EV6's front end, it's so much lower than this, and that hood is pretty short, that I'm okay. But this, you know, does seem like a missed opportunity.
Now, if you were to reposition the battery and some of these control modules into the back where that kind of deeper well was that we were just demonstrating, put grocery bags or whatever, would you rather have a front trunk with a little bit of space, or would you rather have that back space to put more cargo underneath the floor? What would you rather have?
Now, I think you have an interesting point there, Nick. I would say I would take the space in the back if I had to choose one or the other, but I think they could have done both. And I will also say to the detractors out there that are like, every new EV on a dedicated EV platform must have a front trunk. It's no mystery where those front trunks come from. They come from adding inches to the front. So, you know, you have to add some extra space up front in order to have that bag fit under there. And if you put that same amount of space back here in the rear, you could just stick more stuff in the vehicle if you added an extra, you know, 8 or 10 inches onto the back. So I would say I prefer the cargo area in the back, but I would still kind of like a small storage area in the front, maybe for charge cords, things like that.
Yeah, just miscellaneous.
Yeah,
bungees
little stuff.
For some odd reason. But yeah, having both, you definitely could have done both.
Now on the inside, obviously the big reason to get this over GM's Ultium vehicles, except for the Cadillac, is the fact that we actually have CarPlay built into the system. And for some reason, GM is just, not wanting to give us CarPlay. I do have to ask you, do you use CarPlay when you're in the cars every week, or do you prefer to use the native systems?
Well, even in my personal vehicle that doesn't come with CarPlay, I purposely bought a weird Chinese version of CarPlay to install in my 2006. So yes, that is my number one thing.
Yep.
CarPlay is a must, whether it's wired or wireless. I need it.
Yep, and that is like the key reason, because the rest of the software, it's basically what we get in the GM lineup. And I'm really fine with that, because we get Google connected maps. This works really well. Obviously, it shows the live data. I mean, if you've used Google Maps on anything, your computer, your phone, etc., this is fantastic. The software is snappy.
It's very quick. Wow.
Very quick. Yeah, I mean, it feels so natural the way that functions.
And I love that you can.
Yeah, you can pinch zoom, but I mean, just look at that. Or you can use the Apple Maps if you want to, which is actually not as nice as the native app interface, mind you. But I don't know about you, but what I like to do, and the reason I like CarPlay, is because I want to be able to go to my car, and as I'm walking to my car, I want to, find wherever I'm going. So let's go. I would love tortilla flats, so I need to go there. And then I hop in my car, and, it's already navigating me there. But you can't do that with the built-in Google Mapping database.
Let's see how quick it is, though. Should we try some? So
yeah,
what is that
go
called?
ahead. Tortilla flats.
Here. Tortilla flats.
In SoCal.
Okay, tortilla flats.
Hey, they're
Let's
up until
go.
9 today. Stop by and see Zelina, but it'll only take 13 hours,
Multiple
9
charges.
minutes. But this is the reason, of course, that they want you to use the native mapping interface, is that it's going to give you the 7 charging stops to tell you where to stop, how long to charge.
That is very nice, though.
Yeah,
and
it's
going to
tell
the
you
percentage you'll arrive there, too.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And then it's also going to tell you how much you have to have in your battery when you leave that charging stop. So if I say go here, then when I get to that next charging stop, it's going to tell you stay here until you have reached at least 60 or at least 80% or whatever that percentage is. And then over there we have a separate LCD, of course, for the instrument cluster. I think that's an attractive look. What do you think of the steering wheel? I have to say, I like a lot of Honda's design language lately, but I do like this wheel better, I think, than any Honda wheel I've had.
Yeah, it's nice and thick. There's not any bolsters or any sort of bump out for your thumb holds, which I actually don't mind, because the way the 3-spoke design is, your thumbs kind of rest there anyways. But it's nice. It has a nice thick stitching on the inside, nice contrast stitching. This is a GM wheel, of course. This is the same exact
very GM.
buttons and paddles and everything that on this wheel is everything GM, with the Honda logo with the exception. It's I don't know, I like it. There's nothing really to complain about. No, it's heated. We have heated and cooled seats. There's plenty of amenities inside the cabin, which is
Yep,
a nice
down here
touch.
we have lots of physical buttons. So, automatic climate control, heated and ventilated seats. The styling of the interior was all done by Honda, and the styling of the exterior was all done by Honda as well. Of course, with the limitations of what they could do within this platform. But I am actually really okay with this collaborative philosophy, because in a way you can get the best of both worlds. I don't like everything that Honda does. I like some things that they do, and I love some things that GM does. And sometimes collaborations like this can actually give us the better of both worlds. I love the Google connected infotainment system, for instance, but I also like me some CarPlay. I think that the Honda logo is actually an attractive logo compared to the Chevy bow tie.
For sure.
But I like the GM steering wheel. But I like the fact that we have more of a linear theme here, and a different vibe than we have going on in the Chevy. Also, some slight tone-on-tone action here. So this is a soft touch plastic, but this is not the same color as that. Both soft touch materials, and that continues onto the side with this sort of subtle matching of different grays. And that two-tone gray on gray applies to the seats as well, both front and rear. What do you think of that seat design? I found them to be pretty comfortable. Actually, they're really cushy. Not as adjustable on the passenger side as the driver's side, but pretty comfortable.
My biggest complaint is going to be the orange contrast stitching.
You're not a fan? Oh.
No, it's a very light orange. It's almost light enough to almost be maybe a light brown. It's just, it doesn't fit. There's no other orange accents that I can see in this vehicle. It's, other than, obviously, the rest of the stitching.
That makes it rugged and off-roady.
Right. Kind of reminds me of some of the Subaru accents with the yellow or the green.
Yeah, it's kind of a
It's interesting. But
kind of a wildernessy look.
I do like the seats. They're obviously here in the Elite, you do get the leather trim. Very nicely. But in the back, I don't know if I necessarily love how much of this lighter gray they use. It's very cheap looking in my personal opinion. I'm not a huge fan. It kind of reminds me of a synthetic material while it is still leather.
Yeah, and that's one of those areas where, as I always tell people, style tends to be a very personal thing. So if you like something, that's totally okay. And if it doesn't match my opinion, that's fine too. Because I actually really like this light gray on dark gray interior. I think I like it an awful lot better than just the black on black interior that we have in our long-term Blazer.
Yeah, it does. It does help lighten up the interior. It doesn't make it as claustrophobic because you do have a dark headliner as well, so that kind of breaks it up nicely. So I do agree in a sense with your opinion. But if I were personally buying this vehicle, I don't know if I would go this route.
And then up here, of course, we have the OnStar controls because we still have OnStar. And if it's actually kind of difficult to show you because of the lighting here, it's really, really bright outside, but we do have a powered shade and a power moonroof. So this moonroof does open. If you're looking for an EV not only with a shade over the big glass top, but glass that actually opens, then you definitely want to check out something like this. So what's the first thing you noticed out on the road in this?
Well, other than the noise it makes under 25 miles an hour, the first thing I noticed is how soft it rides.
Yeah.
It's very smooth. Like even on some rougher portions, it handles it very well. Now, on this certain road we just got on a second ago, I can hear a lot of road noise, but we do have 21-inch wheels with fairly thin all-season tires, so that you're going to get that kind of trade-off of having a bigger wheel, a thinner tire.
And I will say that's one of the advantages, I think, to GM's Ultium platform and then Honda's interpretation of that here is that, we have those really low profile tires, but we actually still have really good ride quality. I mean, they've masked the ride of this much weight really well. And I think part of that's just because this is a pretty big vehicle. I mean, if you look at photos of this, I don't know if you've noticed this, but when I first saw photos of the Prologue and then I saw it in person, I was like, wow, that is a lot bigger than I thought it was.
I thought it was teeny tiny in commercials.
Yeah, it's just that the shape of it somehow really belies the size. But then the boxiness does allow them to have room for the suspension motion to actually damp the vehicle, damp the suspension motions down, and give us a solid ride quality here.
Yeah, it's very smooth. It's very compliant with the road. Like it doesn't feel soft in a way where it's sloppy around corners. It really does best of both worlds, giving you a nice, like sporty-ish type suspension while being comfortable on some rougher roads. And like you said, it does look a lot smaller than it is in person. But I think also here on this Elite, having those 21-inch wheels fills up that wheel gap and fills up that wheel well a lot better than the 19s. Well, I guess in terms of rim to tire size, and it just looks a lot more proportional.
I will say, ride quality-wise, I do like the smaller tires.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it's a lot better.
Bit more sidewall there. That is definitely nicer. But the ride quality is substantially similar to Blazer. I think that the Blazer that we have, which is the base model, is a little bit softer than this, but it's not a world of difference, really. It is interesting, though. This, like the Blazer and the Equinox, at least for the moment, has a more powerful motor up front. So, kind of the in thing right now with other EVs in the market is they'll put the bigger motor in the back to give you that strong rear power bias. We see that in Mach-E, in, of course, the entire Tesla lineup, Ioniq 5, EV6, etc. But GM and Honda went in a different direction, and Honda could have chosen, to put the bigger motor in the back. They do in the ZDX, but here, big motors up front, little motors in the back.
Yeah, it's more of a pull feel than a push feel from the rear. But like 280 horsepower in a internal combustion engine isn't that much in today's market. But 288 horsepower with that instant torque, that 333 pound-feet of torque, that it feels like it has plenty of power on public roads. Now, obviously, there's always room for more horsepower, but is it usable horsepower? That is to be determined, and that's kind of up for personal opinion. I don't necessarily find a need for any more power than this. Now, there's a want for more power than this, but that's, again, per user, per buyer. But I think this powertrain feels nice. It's not too aggressive. It's linear, so when you do apply that throttle all the way down, or I guess accelerator all the way down, I don't know, it just feels very well balanced. I'm really impressed. And I think you have a lot more experience in the Ultium platform than I do. I think having those wheels pushed further forward and out towards the corners helps a lot around corners, especially even just putting the power to the ground. Is that a fair assessment?
There's a solidity to the feel. I mean, this feels big. It feels solid. It feels comfortable.
That's the hard part about EVs is you have no choice but to make it solid, because if they built it to the same standard, I don't want to say that the internal combustion engines are built to less quality, but you have noise. You have a lot more emotion that's kind of covering up creaks and rattles and things of that nature. So having an electric car that's silent, especially under 25 miles an hour, makes that little hum noise, but you're going to hear every little creak, every little imperfection in whatever material is equipped in that car. So
yeah, things can't hide as easily.
No. So they have to make it. They have to make it solid. So they definitely did that here in the Prologue.
Yeah, my one complaint I will say that applies equally to all of the GM Ultium platform vehicles and the Honda Ultium platform vehicles is the weight of the vehicle and the efficiency. So, we have a bigger battery pack in here, about 85 kilowatt hours, and it does not get you as far as the 77 kilowatt hour batteries in the Hyundai and Kia EVs, or of course the smaller battery packs that we find in the Tesla lineup for sure. And a lot of that just has to do with the weight. This is significantly heavier than the Hyundai, the Kia, the Genesis, the Tesla EVs, etc. Even the Ford Mustang Mach-E has a pretty big battery pack, but the general construction of the vehicle is lighter weight than this. And that heavier weight does unfortunately compromise handling a bit when you're making direct comparisons. But I don't think the handling is bad here at all. I mean, that's not to say that it's not to say that this feels crazy bad or anything. It's just that you will get that next level in the competition. But, I think that this still is a fantastic combination.
Now, you say the Ultium platform is heavy. Why is that? Like, what makes the vehicle so heavy?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, and I'm curious to see how you feel about this, because you're much more likely to work on your own car than some of the other people that we've had on the channel, or even I am a little bit lazy these days. I don't work on my own car as often as I'd like, but it all has to do with repairability. Now, admittedly, this is not you and me kind of repairability. This would be dealer and service center repairability, but in a lot of the lighter weight EVs out there, the battery packs are not serviceable. I have to caution and preface this with actually servicing a battery pack or needing to service a battery pack is incredibly rare. I mean, we're talking very, very unlikely failure rates for the pack itself. But if you were concerned about that, or you are concerned about recyclability and repurposability of the components, that is part of why Ultium is so heavy. So like in a Tesla, the individual cells are all grouped together in one large massive pack. A lot of EVs, the batteries are actually kind of glued together with thermal adhesives, etc. Really, packaging density is the thing there. In the Ultium platform of vehicles, GM wanted modularity and they wanted repairability. So individual cells can be replaced, and those individual cells are then assembled into separate modules. So this pack has 10 modules. The ZDX has a 12 module pack, so a bigger pack. Hummer EV has 24 modules. It's a really big battery. Yeah. And each of these modules is replaceable by a dealer. So they can actually take out one of those modules, put a new module in if something goes wrong. It will adapt to new battery chemistries even, so it's very flexible in that respect. But each of these modules has independent cooling hoses that are connected and independent cooling channels, their own steel cases for protection of that pack. And then they go into a bigger steel housing to house the whole thing structurally in the vehicle. And all of that modularity adds complexity and it adds weight, etc. And then there is just the size of this. This is not a little EV like we were talking about earlier. And I think that's what sometimes gets lost with Prologue and Blazer both. You checked out the back seat. It's a huge back seat. Yeah. So on paper, sometimes it's confusing, and people will assume that this is very Model Y sized, which is roomy inside, but it is not that roomy. It's not that kind of back seat. This is huge in the back. Honestly, more generous in many dimensions as far as the back seat than a Pilot or a Prologue. We're just talking about the second row. And so that size does come with a weight restraint, a weight reality there. And then there's the other reality that Honda and GM are both trying to have a mainstream affordable EV, and so they don't build really much out of aluminum at all. There's very little aluminum going on in the construction of the vehicle. The body panels, etc., they're all steel, and steel's heavy. So no exotic materials going on in the construction, no carbon fiber, no aluminum body panels, etc. And I think that's how we end up just at that 5,300 pounds. The front wheel drive model is a little bit lighter, but it's still pretty heavy.
I do feel like that's a fair trade-off, though. A little bit heavier of a vehicle, you're having some serviceability in terms of the batteries, as well as having a very like structurally sound vehicle, not having any cut corners, trying to save weight. This is a very solid vehicle, and I think the weight actually plays a massive part into performing that way. So it's a trade-off for me, but I think it's a well worth trade-off. And obviously I would never work on an electric vehicle because that's dangerous and I don't want to do that. It's out of my knowledge realm, but having that flexibility, it definitely is a hope for the future in terms of trying to make these vehicles last as long as possible. And if it needs to have a battery replacement or a cell or any sort of replacement or repair, it makes it a lot easier for the dealer to, one, work on, and also for the user to get it worked on.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take it to the Tesla service center. It's, there's not a lot of independent servicing going on there.
No.
But that is that interesting question about sustainability and environmental impact. Yes, you do have to break apart the battery in a Tesla if you wanted to replace individual cells. It's theoretically possible, but it's a lot more work. They weren't really made with that reality in mind. They were made with the reality that battery pack failure is very, very, very unlikely. And so that's where I am torn, because if you were driving a Model Y or an Ioniq 5 or an EV6, you're consuming less energy over 100,000 miles or 200,000 miles than in this vehicle. So you're creating less CO2 if you're buying your energy from a source that's not renewable. Even if you are getting your energy from a renewable source, like we're up here in Washington, most of the power here comes from hydro. It's a renewable energy source, or at least a zero emission source, depending how you want to classify that, but generally carbon neutral. But you're still consuming more of it, and you're paying more for that over the lifetime of the vehicle, 20, 30% more even, than something that's more efficient. But with that efficiency comes the reality that if something does go wrong with the battery pack, it's not going to be as easy or as sustainable to fix it. You're going to have to get a replacement pack. If it's under warranty, the dealer's going to replace the whole pack. That pack is going to go back to the manufacturer, where maybe some portion of it will be salvaged, maybe some portion of it will be reworked, maybe it won't. Maybe it will have to go off to be recycled as, one recycled piece. This at least has the promise of being able to go in, have only a small portion of the pack get swapped out, have that small portion then go to the manufacturer so that one cell could be extracted, replaced, and then put back into service as a reworked pack for some future service. So I am pretty torn on that, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I would love to know what our viewers think down there in the comments section below, because it's something we don't really have a good amount of data on, especially even surveys. I have never seen a survey asking EV shoppers, like, which way did they lean? What would they prefer a manufacturer to do? So I am kind of curious, especially if you guys own EVs out there yourself, what is your preference? Would you lean on the reality that battery pack servicing is rare? Or would you rather lean on the side of sacrificing some efficiency so that way, in that unlikely event, you would still be able to have a more sustainable vehicle? Let us know.
If you were looking to get yourself into a Honda Prologue, you're going to be looking at just shy of $49,000 for the EX or the base trim. Now, what we have here is the top trim, the Elite, and this is just going to be shy of $60,000, which is still cheaper than the Blazer.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. The Blazer starts, around $50,000. In the 2024 model year for ours, it was about $51,000. But of course, the Blazer does not have a front-wheel drive model just yet, like we do find in the Prologue. So that does let the Prologue get a little bit less expensive and have a little bit more range currently in the Blazer. But of course, the Blazer looks like it's going to get some updates for 2025, including a bit more power. So 300 horsepower out of its dual motor all-wheel drive system. And then of course, we're also going to get the Blazer EV SS, which drives that up to, absolutely bonkers levels as well.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that performs. But I think this is a good all-around vehicle if you are looking for something that doesn't need a third row. If you're just looking for something to putz around town, this is definitely a nice vehicle for that. And I think it's a very strikingly beautiful iteration of an EV SUV. Now, that might be a personal opinion, but I think it's a I don't know, it's just, I love the roundness. I love how different it is than all the other vehicles on the road. Now, I would assume that in the coming years, things are gonna start looking more and more like this, but I enjoy the looks of this, especially over the Blazer competition.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning of the video, before we got the Blazer EV as our long-term, I was really looking at a Prologue, and I really wanted that headlining teal color that they're always showing in the ads, because I thought that just worked with the design here really well. The reality is that a lot of EVs, including the Blazer and the Prologue, are leased, and the lease deal is really what's going to drive a lot of folks one way or the other, I think. And at least when we were doing the lease in our Blazer EV, it was a lot less expensive than a Prologue. Although, as I understand it, you can now actually get some Prologue leases that are almost as cheap. So that's, you know, if you actually could get them for the same price, would you lean this direction, or would you lean Blazer with the bigger screens?
I'm gonna go Honda.
I would go Honda as well.
I wanted to point out, I would rather, now this is obviously, again, a personal situation, I would rather go to a Honda dealership than a Chevy dealership. It's kind of a weird thing. I mean, I might be a little swayed. I did work at a Honda dealership, but I find it to just be a little bit more, I don't know, gentle and welcoming than a Chevy dealership. I don't know how that makes sense in someone else's brain, but it makes sense in mine.
It makes sense in mine too, and I have to admit though that I have to temper that. Maybe this is just you know, a perception rather than reality, but I have to temper that by saying that our single best ever purchase experience for a new car outside of Tesla and Rivian, where there's no dealer involved at all, was actually the Blazer EV. The dealer was fantastic. I mean, it was just super smooth. They didn't know who we were. You know, we used the holding company name that owns Auto Buyer's Guide, so they didn't know that we were going to be filming anything or anything like that. And that was just the simplest, smoothest, nicest process ever. The dealer was very pleasant, etc. I mean, everything was just super duper smooth. So, you know, based on reality, I would say that there's nothing wrong with the Chevy dealer. However, I have to admit also that, you know, dealer reputation would definitely be one significant reason to go over Honda, because we know that that may be one fantastic Chevy dealer. But is that every Chevy dealer? You know, my spidey sense says no. My spidey sense says you'd be better off going to the Honda dealer if you want an easier purchase experience.
Yeah, for sure. Let us know down in the comments what you think between the Blazer and the Honda Prologue. I really enjoy the looks of this, but let us know down in the comments what you think and which one would you choose if you were in the market for something of this nature.
Yep, and of course keep in mind $7,500 tax credit on this Honda as well. See all of you later.